Well, Hong Lu's season highlight identity is here, and it's quite something, with very unique mechanics and a very special uptie story with additional art. There's a lot of other YouTubers who will tell you if a unit is strong enough to be worth your lunacy. It's not always Shard. I'm not too concerned with power though. What I care about, as a game designer of moderate skill, is how well the ID contributes to the overall design of Limbus Company as a game. This is a seasonal highlight ID, after all, it's meant to be the next step forward in ID design. I'll be rating this ID, and any others I choose to do in the future, with the following scale. Number 1. Combat Flow. How good does this ID feel to pilot? Are you just spamming win rate? Or do you have a solid game plan and choices to make? How rewarded are you for your skill in the game? 2. Niche. Does this unit have a clearly defined role in your team? Something no other unit can accomplish? And is this role rewarding, or does it get in the way? 3. Team building. How much expression can you show before you even start the battle? Are you rewarded for finding unique team combinations? 4. Fulfillment. Does this unit fit the flavor of what it's trying to be? Or who it's trying to be? Does it feel like the person it's mimicking? Does it make you feel like it's hitting all the right spots? And number 5 is cleanliness. How easy is it to understand this unit? Is it making good use of all of its text, or is it bloated? With those rules established, let's get on with it. Firstly, Hong Lu is a Rupture/Poise unit who is a bit lacking in both statuses. This is a design plus. He's already very strong, so being lacking in certain statuses helps to balance things out. He also has effects that trigger based on how many different debuffs are on the target. I kinda wish they made this more impactful. It's a more interesting condition to fulfill than just Poise or Rupture. Design neutral. Surprisingly, no death rights, unlike his main story counterpart. That's fine. He's already got plenty of effects, including ways to make sure other characters can get their death rights active. Onto the skill 1, this is a pretty simple attack, as expected, but it also has a defense power boost that applies based on resonance, prioritizing allies with assist defense. Simple, clean, has its uses despite being a skill 1. That's what I like to see. Skill 2 is a 4-coiner, which is pretty unique. It has some unbreakable coins, and applies gluttony damage up to other allies using gluttony skills. Solid, but not crazy, and goes through Rupture and Poise count in exchange for big damage. Good design. Skill 3 is where things get crazy, because this skill is essentially split into multiple parts. Part 1 does not trigger defense skills, which is something no other skill does yet. The effect of the attack itself is just an offense level and defense level debuff, based on negative effects on target. The real meat comes next, giving a small but permanent buff to another Heisho, then initiating a combo attack. This combo has the partnered Heisho use their skill 3, and Hong Lu uses another half of his skill 3, which has a bunch of conditionals for different ways to hit harder, and inflicts /resist down next turn, which is a pretty uncommon form of debuff. Finally, after the combo, Hong Lu gains a permanent buff based on the Heisho he partnered with. I'll go over those later. However, if no Heisho are available, instead of comboing, he'll just use a more powerful skill 3 follow-up. Overall, this skill is one of the most powerful skill 3s in the game, because it's essentially just 2 skill 3s, which also buff both units permanently, even if only by a little. Finally, in terms of skills, we have his counter. This is one of my favorite defense skills. See, when designing an ID, it's good to ensure that the defense skill has an actual use case that's distinct from the rest of the kit. If it's just a weaker skill 1, like most early counters, or if it's just a way to avoid clashing, like most early guards, then it's basically a wasted part of the kit. Hong Lu's guard circumvents this by serving as both a buff for allied Heisho, as well as a way to have allied Heisho retreat, choosing the Heisho with the least HP, having them perform their skill 1, then retreating, healing up, and being put in an admittedly odd spot in the return order. This is both a strong effect, due to his passive that we'll get to next, and an incredible way to make his gameplay loop interesting beyond spamming win rate. Huge design plus, but there's a few flaws I'll get to later. His first passive is a huge one. When an ally substitutes in, they gain SP, then use a skill 1, which is powerful on its own. But then, if the ally is a Heisho or Jia family unit, they use skill 3 instead, which is crazy strong. I actually really like this. Cycling out units should be a powerful effect. They've been encouraging killing off units or having units retreat for a while now, and we finally have a strong payoff to make the extra effort worth it. And while there is a big discrepancy in which units can make full use of it, a free skill 1 is nothing to scoff at. In addition, this passive gives him a buff when Heisho allies die, deals more damage with every team up he's done, and gives a permanent buff based on how many Heisho are deployed, whether on field or backup. This effect is admittedly a bit odd. It makes him stupid fast for no reason. He doesn't have much in his kit that makes use of speed. Mostly though, it's a damage up, and with enough Heisho, he gives them all a tiny boost. The second passive is pretty fun too. Activating with the incredibly easy condition of Gluttony Owned, it allows him to redirect unopposed hits against him to Heisho units instead, who will respond with a weak clashable guard. This is a huge design plus, manipulating the action economy in a way that doesn't deal more damage, but still opens opportunities for unopposed attacks, which some Heisho want. Now that's what I call team synergy. This passive also allows him to resist death for a turn, though this won't last long as he gains Tarnished Blood, the same as the one from his Ego skill, which will eventually kill him again. Thankfully, he has another form of resisting death. If he did use the aforementioned Ego skill, he will, instead of dying, heal back up to 60%, letting him use the Ego a total of 3 times, if you use Dimension Shredder's passive. I actually quite like this. It's not just a basic power boost to the Ego, but rather a unique interaction. So, design plus from me. Finally, let's move on to his combo passives. Admittedly, these aren't as strong as I thought they'd be from the previews, but they're still nice little bonuses to his kit. Faust makes him take less damage, Ryoshu gives him a tiny damage boost for making use of that speed buff he gets, Otis lets him inflict slightly more rupture count if he goes unopposed, Rodion gives him rupture infliction on crit, and Gregor gives him poise count. This is a really cool effect, and like I said before, it's honestly a shame it isn't stronger, given how long it takes to ramp up. Cool, that's everything. Let's get into how it all stacks up. Hong Lu's biggest weaknesses are his low HP stat, and his inability to keep up his main statuses. In exchange, he essentially gets to use the skills of his allies, for massive damage and more Sin resource generation. This utility makes him Captain Ishmael on steroids, giving him multiple viable playstyles and really rewarding thinking things through instead of spamming win rate, which, as I mentioned, is one of the best things an ID can do. Unfortunately, he lacks greatly in terms of team building opportunities, and this is where I want to talk about a concept I'm going to call Forced Faction Synergy. See, Forced Faction Synergy is when Project Moon wants units of the same faction to work well together. So they slap effects that specifically reference their team in order to make them more effective. The problem is, this is a very brute force way to go about game design. IDs of the same faction should already be contributing to the same game plan, and thus should already have good synergy with each other. But the main problem with Limbus is their insistence on having every unit focus on one or more of the main 7 status effects. This forces there to be essentially 7 main teams at once, and with a lot more than 7 factions, you'd need to use each status in a very different way to make each faction stand out. This is not what Limbus does nowadays. Instead of focusing on the unique gameplay style of each faction, Limbus generally chooses to throw power up, coin power up, damage up, and status infliction up like it's candy, once you have a team leader ID like Kurikumo Ishmael or Blade Lineage Merceau. What's much better for the game is effects that work well with any team, but that the specific faction members will make better use of. Diversifying statuses and other gimmicks helps teams to not only distinguish themselves, but may allow for multiple separate factions to have unexpected synergy for more team building options. I call this natural faction synergy, and my favorite example is actually the Zwei Association. No, not you two. Specifically, these 4. They all focus on granting and/or making use of defense level up. A pretty underwhelming status that nonetheless is usable on any ID, and is present on a good few other IDs who don't use it as part of their main kit. This means that they encourage good team building to make good use of them, while not feeling like you're being forced into a single build. Admittedly, this Hong Lu avoids many of the common pit traps, since his primary faction synergy is built around effects that are actually unique instead of just more stats. But so much of his utility is built around his specifically chosen allies, when they don't need to be. Why can't his counter buff other units? Why can't he swap them out either? It's just not needed to lock so much of his kit behind the Heisho. Anyways, that might be a topic I'll expand upon in another episode. Let's get back to the rating. At this point, I think it's time for a final score tally. For combat flow, I'm giving a 9 out of 10. He's got a lot of unique mechanics, especially on his skill 3 and counter, that keep you thinking. Plus a notable but manageable weakness in his status application. Solid design. Niche. 8 out of 10. He's an enabler for retreat-focused comps, only held back by his focus on Heisho. Very unique indeed. Team building. Clearly the biggest flaw. Thankfully, while he gets strong benefits from a full Heisho team, he only needs about 1 or 2 to get about 2/3 or so of his synergy. I'll be generous and give him a 5 out of 10. Fulfillment. This Hong Lu is clearly meant to be an alternate take on Jia Chu, who has some pretty cool effects that aren't present in this ID, such as Deathrite Deluge. That said, the focus is meant to be more on being a commander, and on that, it succeeds. 8 out of 10. Finally, cleanliness. Surprisingly, I think this ID makes good use of most of its text. While he does have a bunch of damage stacking, similar to another seasonal highlight ID that I have less positive feelings towards, at least this is kept manageable. 9 out of 10. So, if you average out these scores, it comes to a 7.8, which I'll round up to 8 out of 10. A very solid unit that's just held back by some frustrating choices. If you want to know how I feel about some other notable IDs, here's a quick comparison. Keep in mind that I'd give the average ID around a 5, so even a 6 is a good rating. Also, if anyone takes this out of context and presents it as a power tier list, I'm claiming your bones. Alright, that wraps it up. Hopefully I got my thoughts across well, but I'm still new to this whole opinionated video thing. If you'd like me to go deeper into what I think a good ID design is, I'd love to do so. I've got plenty of opinions on the subject. Anyway, check out my Stars of the City TTRPG. I'm working on reworking level progression and milestones. Plus I've got a special announcement I should be ready to talk about in the next few weeks. See you soon!